is Jason JROCK Houston, and you're listening to Chaotic Riffs Magazine. We can be found on the web at www.chaoticriffs.com. And our special guest tonight is lead singer Shawn Perry from the Los Angeles-based Guns N' Roses tribute band Lose Your Illusion. And today we'll be speaking with Shawn not only about the band he plays in, but about the Guns N' Roses album Use Your Illusion too. So welcome to the show, Shawn. And why don't we start off with the interview telling us how long you've been playing with your band Lose Your Illusion?
Let's see, since 2016. Yeah, Mono recruited me. Mono's our lead guitarist, and he reached out to me regarding, filling in some shows in 2016.
Wow. And were you the original singer?
No. Man, he's had this band going since 2012, and he's been through his fair share of musicians and all that, and, we're finally to a point to where it's like for the past couple of years, it's been solid, and we got exactly the right personnel in there.
And I'll tell people who knows nothing about your band or Mano, he's one of the first guys out here in LA that I ever saw paying any kind of tribute to Slash or Guns N' Roses, and he remains one of the best. And I think it's kind of interesting that there's not more Guns N' Roses tributes out there. I mean, if you go on the internet, sure you can find a number of it, but especially here in LA, I'm only aware of maybe like one other band, and I think that's kind of surprising. But what are your thoughts on that?
It's a tough gig. I mean, to pull it off right. I mean, LA probably had about, let's see, a couple years ago there were 5 or 6 floating around, and they all just kind of dissipated. Everybody, I don't know. I mean, and don't get me wrong. There's, I'm friends with a couple of the guys and in the other tributes, but it seems like people want to live the life rather than just go out and play the music, and it's not about that. Venues don't want to deal with that. You're not Guns N' Roses. We're not Guns N' Roses. We're just going out trying to do our best to recreate their concert. And
you guys kind of also dress the part, which I kind of dig, because it's one thing to go see a band play in their jeans and t-shirts, another thing to actually dress up like the guys. I like to call it rock and roll theater, because a lot of people are under a misconception. Guys that play in tribute bands, they're failed musicians. They're playing other people's music. But I'll tell you, as a guy that's not even a musician, I can't play musical lists. It takes a certain level of talent to even be able to do that. To be able to master that material.
Yeah, and it's for us guys who want to play and really don't have the time to put. I mean, if I'm speaking for myself, I don't have the time for an original band. I mean, that's a gut wrenching task. So props to you guys out there who are pushing and driving to do it.
I mean, it's not what it once was, the music industry, and a lot of times these days it's much easier to make it in a tribute band as opposed to doing the original thing, like you're saying, Shawn. And and I'll tell you a funny story. I'm sure you've heard of a Led Zeppelin tribute, Led Zeppelin, and and I've interviewed the singer Swan a couple times, and he was kind of sharing.
Yeah, my bassist is good friends with him.
And he was kind of sharing with me that oddly enough, like a lot of people, he did the original music thing for a while, and he said, actually, due to the Led Zeppelin thing, he said, as a result of that, I'm now able to kind of release solo albums and do solo stuff on the side, and it allows me to kind of get my stuff out there, as opposed if I had never done the Led Zeppelin thing, and it's kind of interesting,
Yeah, I mean, my first gig I ever played, I was in high school, and we were booked at the Whiskey on a Sunday night, and before the show, we went to the Rainbow. We're teenagers. We have to go to the Rainbow, have pizza, and in walks Steven Adler, and this is 1997, so he's well removed from the band at the time. And we're just like, holy shit, it's a gunner, and we got to talking to him. We're like, hey, man, we're actually covering Mama Ken tonight. You should come play with us. Sure enough, he strolls down and sits in and plays Mama Ken with us. Our first show ever. We're like, well, that was easy. We've made it.
That's kind of interesting you bring up that song, because anybody knows Mama Ken is originally an Aerosmith tune. And the thing I love about when GNR Live came out is they had the live side and then they had the acoustic side. And on the live side, they do a version of that. And, like kind of like with Knocking on Heaven's Door, while that's an Aerosmith tune, that's one of those cover tunes that GNR was able to really kind of own and make their own.
Right. Yeah. Same with like Live and Let Die.
Yeah. And before we get into the talking about Use Your Illusion 2, I'd like to ask you, before you joined this band, how much of a GNR fan were you?
Oh, avid. Probably since I was 9 years old. Well, let me back up. So my brother used to work for a record store when he was 15.
Record store. I remember those. I'm a little older.
It was this little shithole store on Roscoe Boulevard in North Hills, probably 2 blocks east of Sepulveda. And he used to work for like an album a week, help out the owner here for an hour or 2 a day or whatnot. But he brought home this interview record. I want to say this is 1986. It was before Appetite came out.
Right before, yeah.
Or maybe right in early '87.
Yeah.
Anyway, so before I even heard their music, I'm listening to this interview because he's got it on, and they just seem down to earth. Making fun of Stryper, throwing Bibles out to the crowd and shit like that. And I'm like, and from an early age, I just never really liked religion, so I kind of connected right there. Even as a young kid, I was like, this band is cool.
Well, even going back to '87 when they were just working on the album before it was even released. I mean, I heard these guys had such balls that Paul Stanley was trying to produce their a debut album by these guys, and they're like, we don't want to work with Kiss.
Yeah, I thought it was Gene Simmons, but you could be right.
Yeah. I think as I read in Paul Stanley's book, that's what I remember.
Oh, okay.
But so talk about going from Appetite for Destruction. I even remember back in the day talking about record stores when Metallica and GNR were going on tour together. I remember when those albums were released. I mean, everybody would go to a local Tower Records at the time, and they would wait in line at midnight to be the first ones to get them. I mean.
And occasionally you had the band there signing autographs. I know Slayer did it, but I think with like Seasons in the Abyss or South of Heaven. But the band used to show up, sign autographs at the bigger Tower Records locations.
And now before we get into Use Your Illusion 2, last thing I kind of want to touch base on is another thing that I kind of, when I went to your band's website, that kind of drew my attention right away is I love the fact that like you guys are not an all original Guns N' Roses tribute in the sense that like you don't have a Slash, you don't have an Izzy. I dig the fact you have a guy that is actually like playing the part of Richard Fortus, which is kind of cool.
Wait, did you say? Oh, okay. I think you said we don't have a Slash. You mean?
No. What I mean is like it's not a band where you have all the original. You're not playing the role of all the original Guns guys. Like you got Richard Fortus. You don't have somebody maybe playing Steven Adler, which is what you would expect. So I think that makes your band a little different, which is also a cool thing.
Yeah, we've tried to keep this thing up to date with the modern era. I mean, right now, 3 generations of fans are going to see Guns N' Roses. They have grossed over probably about, I think it's $600 million with this Not in This Lifetime tour. And a lot of people are going out and seeing them. So we want those people to see us and put it together. Yeah,
that's cool. Now, getting into Use Your Illusion 2, since that's the main topic tonight. Obviously, they released the 2 albums at the same time, and I remember before it was even released, they were kind of trying to make the decision: should we release it as a package because it's going to be more money? Should we release it separately, which is but make it available on the same day, which is what they ultimately did. Which I think that's kind of a cool thing because in a way, the fans got a little extra than what you would with like just a single album release,
Right. Yeah, I remember that journey. I mean, I was 13 and going into record stores every day, going to the front counter, excuse me, did the Guns N' Roses album Use Your Illusion drop yet? And and all of a sudden one day it was just there. Like, oh, shit.
And I think what a lot of fans fail to realize is because, I remember back in the day around this time, I used to collect a lot of, bootlegs and stuff like that, and a lot of these songs were from demos the band had been done early on in their career, even pre-Appetite, and like for example, Don't Cry. That was a song that almost I guess ended up on Appetite, but they decided we're going to save that for the next album. We're going to go with Sweet Child, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, I think that was the first song they ever wrote was Don't Cry.
Yeah, and so when the Use Your Illusions album were both came out, you obviously lean a little more towards Use Your Illusion 2, so I was kind of curious on that. why that is, you know?
I do, because the melody. I mean, hands down, Estranged.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah.
I mean, if Estranged was on Use Your Illusion 1, it would probably be that one. But just some of the most beautiful melody and lyrics and guitar work you've ever heard in a song. And it just kind of... That what is it? About a 9-minute and 45-second song, something like that.
Oh, at least.
And it just captures everything, sort of like Coma does on Use Your Illusion 1, but just a strange, man, just so beautiful. And of course, there's the ones that don't get as much recognition that I think are still great, like Breakdown, Locomotive.
I'll tell you,
Shotgun Blues. I mean, it's just anger.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you my two favorites off of that of Use Your Illusion 2. I'd have to agree, Estranged, and I think part of the reason for that is it's just such a beautiful song, like you said. The fact that it's, they're one of the bands that like broke the ultimate, the rule that a song can't be 9 or 10 minutes long. Well, they went with that with the single. They actually made a video for it. It was all over MTV, and people didn't seem to mind the length of the song. But I know what I love about the songs is just such a beautiful song, and then you watch a video and you kind of think, okay, this guy, he must have lived this stuff, because you listen to songs like, I can tell this guy went through this stuff, he experienced it, something he lived through.
Oh yeah, that song has Aaron Everly written all over it.
Yeah, and I'll tell you my other favorite off that one, which is kind of I think a middle finger to the establishment at the time, or perfect even for what's going on in the world today. Get in the Ring. Duff's song. Yeah, and but it's it's interesting, like you said, Duff wrote it, but it's got that Axl attitude, and he's the perfect one to deliver it. And I think what obviously a lot of people didn't like about it back in the day was he named specific names. I mean, we even to this day remember Andy Serkis from Hit Parader. Yeah, Mick Wall.
Bob Guccione Jr. at Spin.
Yeah, you more pissed off because your dad gets more. What?
Right. Yeah, that was ballsy, man. And that was one of the cool things about moving on from Appetite, what was just pure, which was just like pure teenage punk rock and anger and just rawness. But the Illusion album still had a bit of that. And
what's funny is people even to this day will say, what's your favorite Guns album? They'll say, hands down, Appetite. And I can see that to a certain degree, because that's the first sound that anybody ever heard from the band. But at the same time, you look at a song like Get in the Ring, and I think to myself, that song could have very well been on Appetite, because it's got that attitude. But I think the reason it got so much attention, even for not being a single or anything, or one of those songs that they never played on the radio, it became such a huge fan favorite because it was that middle finger to the establishment. And I think if they might have put it on Appetite, I don't think it would have got the attention it did,
Right, I agree.
And the other thing, like when you look at the two Illusion album, I'll tell you, oddly enough, I like both albums, but I do lean more towards Illusions 1, and I'll tell you why. Because it's a little more poppy, not happy-go-lucky, but, more commercial, more radio-friendly. And, like, for example, one of my favorite songs off Illusion 1, I love the song, Dead Horse. It's like, you hear the title, Dead Horse, and what's that? But just a great rock song. And then like you said, Don't Cry, that's one of my all-time favorites off there. Garden of Eden, you just can't go wrong with anything on that album, top to bottom.
Yeah, I agree. Perfect Crime.
Yeah, and I think Use Your Illusion 2 is kind of like you said, a lot of those tunes are not maybe as commercial, as poppy, or as radio friendly, but they're kind of like the deeper, darker.
A lot more depressing, a little sappier.
Yeah.
And I hear you.
And like I think part of the reason they also chose to put Estranged on Volume 2 is for the simple fact, like if you would have put it on Volume 1, not only is it a 9 or 10 minute track, but you also got to compete with Don't Cry.
Well, just in terms of length, you have to compete with November Rain and Coma.
Yeah.
There's that, too.
Yeah, Don't
so
Cry.
I think they had to find that balance, because you also had Locomotive on Use Your Illusion, too.
Yeah.
So, those are some long albums, man.
And then, another one of my favorites off of Illusion 2 is Pretty Tied Up, and then there's the Izzy track, 14 Years.
Right.
And then So Fine, which is, is a Duff song. And I think, oddly enough, that's why on that tour and everything, I think, like, by the end of that was a band literally falling apart, because like with Appetite, it was just the total Guns attitude that everybody came to love, and then you're starting to hear Izzy and Duff do songs, and it's like oh no, everybody's singing lead, or they're trying to
It was slowly turning into the Beatles, wasn't it?
Yeah. and it's like another song I love that I it was released as a single, but I think a lot of people have forgotten about Yesterdays. And that, speaking of the Beatles, that reminded me a lot of the Beatles.
Yeah, Yesterdays. I remember the first time I saw that video, I went, oh shit, Axl cut his hair. He had to pull back in a ponytail.
Yeah.
I'm like, and that was the time when there was a lot of that going around. Everybody's cutting their hair off.
Yeah. And then another thing on Illusion 2 is the alternate version of Don't Cry. It's a little different. It's got a little alternative lyrics, and I tend to lean towards the liking the original version better. But there was that kind of thing going with the fans of like which version is better,
Yeah, it's. I'll tell you what, I like singing the original better.
Yeah.
It's a little bit easier than the cranking those the notes in that last verse.
Yeah. And you brought up a song which I always love, "Live and Let Die." Like I don't. That was one of the songs I was really surprised they covered. But again, I think a lot of people tend to think of that as a Guns N' Roses song more as a Paul McCartney song these days, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, and imagine if they put like "Sympathy for the Devil" on one of the Illusion albums.
Yeah, you can get that one like on the greatest hits thing, but that's how they made that available. On the
right.
Yeah.
Or the Interview with the Vampire soundtrack, I think.
Yeah. But and same thing with "Knocking on Heaven's Door." I mean, that's a song you never go too wrong with. But again, because the Bob Dylan version was came out so many moons ago that I think a lot of people, especially the Guns fans, might not even have a clue who Bob Dylan is.
Oh, right. I mean, as a kid, when that song came out, that was the first time I ever heard it was Guns N' Roses. I think it was on Days of Thunder.
Yeah.
And that was the first I ever heard of it. And then I remember my mom telling me, no, that's actually a Bob Dylan song.
Yeah.
So I went and listened to the Bob Dylan version and said to myself, I'm glad GNR did this.
Yeah, and you really can never go wrong with the Bob Dylan tune for a simple fact that he's such a great writer, especially if you go back and look at a lot of the classic stuff. And I like to do that sometimes every now and then, Shawn, when I find out a band covered a certain song. I'm going to go back and listen to the original artist. And I recently did that with. I'll give you a bit of trivia here that may come to surprise you. I'm sure you're an Alice Cooper fan, or at least aware of who Alice is.
Right.
His song, the song "Hello Hooray" off his $1 Billion Babies album.
$1 Billion Babies, yeah.
Now, most people think would be surprised to learn that's not an Alice original. What I come to find out is somebody else actually wrote it, and there's actually another version of a song from a few years before Alice did it by a singer.
I think you have a link posted in one of your pages.
Yeah. That's why I'm mentioning it.
You know what? And I looked at that today, and I said to myself, that's not an Alice song?
Yeah, but what's funny, and so I listened to two versions, and what's funny about it is, man, they sound like two very different, not even just different people singing. They sound like two completely different songs. You'd never know it was the same song, which is kind of interesting when you see people kind of take a cover and really make it their own.
Right.
Yeah.
I dig that, and that's that GNR's exceptional at that.
Yeah. And now, as far as when you're on stage performing these songs, I mean, do you take the approach that I'm going to try to stay as close as I possibly can to the way Axl does it, or I'm going to just kind of do my thing and hope it comes?
Oh, no. You gotta. Well, for me, I approach it as close to Axl as I can because nobody's paying to see me.
Yeah. But I'll tell you what you must find in your gigs, Shawn, is like, again, I call it rock and roll theater because when I go to these tribute shows, I especially dig the bands that do like what you guys do and dress the part and get up there and do the songs as well. And a lot of times, especially before Guns N' Roses got back together, there was a time where we thought never going to see Guns N' Roses up on stage again, so we were only going to get to see bands like this performing the material. And I'll tell you, I was as surprised as anybody when Axl finally was willing to get back with Slash and Duff, especially I hear him talking about Slash as a cancer and this and that, and just maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and I'm like, never going to happen. But wow, was I surprised,
I I did not think it was going to happen until Ron Thal left the band.
Yeah.
That's kind of when I knew. I'm like, okay, the only way they can replace somebody like Ron Thal at this point is to just get the original guys back together.
Yeah. And so, see, it's not even all the original guys they needed to get, but they got the main kind of three.
Right.
And I think that's why fans are willing to kind of, accept that. And even like when you had guys temporarily, and they're like you said, like Bumblefoot or DJ Aspa. I mean, they were kind of like they were decent replacements, but nobody could really, I think, fill in for Slash. If you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, when I lost my train of thought.
Yeah. Well, we were talking about tribute bands and thinking at one time like you might be the closest thing that they were ever going to get seeing Guns N' Roses actually back together.
Yeah, I wasn't too shocked by it. What I am shocked by is the amount of success it's had.
Yeah.
Because I mean, Slash by himself couldn't, I mean, he could fill a place like the Palladium.
Yeah.
Axl by himself with the Chinese Democracy lineup overseas, it was huge and all that, but you could feel it in the States. People were getting weary. The venues were getting a little smaller and smaller.
Yeah.
So just by adding, Duff and Slash and seeing what it's turned back into is just, it's got to be overwhelming for them.
Yeah, and going back to the Use Your Illusion era when the band was on tour supporting these albums, eventually Izzy left, and I kind of dug the guy that got to take his place, Gilby Clarke. I mean, he kind of gets an honorable mention. A lot of people forget about him, but
right.
I think he did a decent job. I think of filling in for Izzy.
Yeah, I think so too. And the sad part is we never really got to see the potential of Gilby Clarke, writing with Slash or anything like that. Yeah. I mean, the only album he was on was the Spaghetti Incident, which was all covers. But yeah, I mean, we'll just never know.
And oddly enough, I don't know if you remember this, but at the time that he was let go from Guns N' Roses, part of the reason was because he had just come out with solo album, his first one at the time, called Pawn Shop Guitars, and Axl actually makes an appearance on that. And Axl didn't like the fact that he was, well, what are you going to do on a solo album? But he came out with a solo album and he's singing lead on everything, and I think he got afraid that Gilby was going to want to write or sing lead on a Guns N' Roses album. Like, we're not having that,
Yeah. In that era, that time and place, and what was that, about 95?
Yeah, yes, because that's right around when Slash first put out the first Snake album, and I remember he was starting to sue him over not saving that stuff for Guns N' Roses.
I mean, it's hard to tell what anybody was thinking at that time. Yeah. I mean, on one hand, you had an egomaniac, manic depressive versus drug addicts. Yeah,
and
not a good combo.
And that was the most comical thing, because I remember, obviously early on, they had all done drugs or experience, but by that time Axl was like, no, I'm the only one in the band not doing drugs, and this and that. These guys better get their act together. So you got to have a certain level of respect for what he was doing at the time.
Right.
Yeah.
He was focused. I mean, he definitely knew what he wanted. Respect to that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, when you get those type of personalities trying to keep the biggest thing in the world going, it's next to impossible.
Yeah, and it's interesting, like, looking at these Use Your Illusion albums, because at the time, like I said, I remember I dug the stuff. I thought, okay, it's not Appetite, but it's good. I like it. No complaints here. But there were those diehard fans like, man, this isn't Appetite. This is suck. This Guns N' Roses is going pop. And you'd hear all this, crap like that. But I remember after Slash had left the band, he'd saying, in retrospect, you start to listen to some of the stuff that we were putting out on the Use Your Illusions album. You can hear kind of the breakup of the band, because it was so drastically different.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the Illusion albums were very overproduced, and a lot of people didn't like that. Appetite had that rawness. It is what it is.
And oddly enough, it was the same guy producing the stuff, Mike Klink. And I think where a lot of fans started to kind of turn was not even necessarily the albums, but when they did the live show and Axl started bringing in like keyboard players and horn sections.
The 976 horn section.
Yeah. I mean, people forget that, since Use Your Illusion, we've had the keyboard player Dizzy Reed, and he's pretty cool, and he brings something to the table. But I remember at one point where we had like 2 or 3 keyboard players on stage. Like, well, I don't know why we need that many keyboard players, but okay, it kind of fattens up the sound or whatever. Yeah.
Well, I mean, hell, if Dizzy hadn't broken his arm, he would have been on the Appetite record.
Yeah. And then let's see, Get in the Ring. Breakdown you mentioned, Locomotive. That's another good song off that. You Could Be Mine. Now that was actually the lead single they went with when those albums were released, and it was actually I remember it was off the Terminator soundtrack at the time, and I
believe it dropped in June.
Yeah, and I think that's why when that people heard that track, and that's the first thing they'd heard since Appetite, they're like, oh man, this album's going to be heavy, but like I said, it had a little bit of something on there for everybody, and so I think it has its place in time,
Right.
Because I will say this, like I did like some of the Chinese Democracy stuff, but I mean that was that to me was even a little vastly different than the Illusion stuff.
Yeah, it was surprisingly a little ballad happy.
Yeah. I can listen to that album and I got some love for it, but that's not something I put on every single day. But again, I can't really say that stuff on there, sucks or anything.
Yeah, it just, it once again, it is what it is. It's just not Guns N' Roses as we know them.
Yeah, and people were actually saying, like I think it would have worked, but people may have accepted it more if it was an Axl Rose album. But obviously, the Guns N' Roses name, I guess even he realizes is bigger than any one band member's name.
Right, and Ron Thal had said some years ago that Democracy will probably be one of those albums that ages well. Yeah. People will accept it more over time, and I think they will, just for the simple fact of Duff and Slash playing the material live is validating it.
Yeah. Now, of course, when you guys are doing your live shows and stuff, most fans do want to either hear stuff from Appetite or Illusions, not probably so much from Chinese Democracy. But do you ever like delve into any of those deep cuts off of Chinese Democracy?
Yeah, we cover probably about 3 of the songs. I think it's 3. We do Democracy, Better, and There Was a Time.
Okay, and now
we try to keep their set list, relevant to what they're doing today, and there's we'll get a couple people after shows coming up and going, wow, can't believe you guys even touched Democracy material. That was killer. Thank you.
That's cool too.
Other people saying, fuck you.
Yeah. Well, whatever. You got to have that attitude for what you do and say, be proud of what you're doing. Like, well, I'm sorry you guys didn't like it, but that's the show we did, and
yeah, hopefully you like the other 22 songs.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah, and I'll tip my hat to you guys for that, because there are those other Guns N' Roses tributes that won't touch that stuff. Oh no, that's not the real Guns N' Roses. We only do the classic era stuff. And so that does make you a little different,
I love it all.
Yeah.
If I as a singer, I guess I lean more in the Axl direction, because I'll tell you, it was a little difficult, having mono play the Democracy material, and it got a little bit easier once Slash was playing it live and giving validation to the material itself.
Yeah, because I'll tell you, Shawn, like I was telling you before we started doing the interview today, and we were talking a little on the phone before we got started, part of the reason I reached out to you, because you're a guitar player, Mano. I met him a number of years ago when he first started on the tribute scene, and at the time he was doing the Slash. It was more directly around Slash's Snake Pit and that type of material. And when I remember, he invited me to a few shows, and I'd go see him, and I was really digging what they were doing. And I thought, this is going to be kind of, in my mind, I thought, how could you go wrong with a project like this? Because there's, Slash isn't even doing Snake material anymore. This stuff, it makes it such a original idea for a tribute band. But I think, as great as he was and his bandmates at the time performing that stuff, I think the main reason it didn't work, first of all, Snake Pit only has 2 albums, and let's be honest, a lot of the fans, I think, wanted to hear the Guns N' Roses stuff more, and I think that's what led him to forming the Lose Your Illusion band.
Yeah, I want to say that he was doing the GNR tribute thing first, and the Snake Pit thing was kind of a side project for him that he kind of wanted to get out of his system.
But I think he did it more, full time.
I remember I'm sorry, I'm getting a bad connection here.
Can you hear me now?
There you are.
Okay.
Yeah, so I remember answering an ad in Craigslist regarding, jamming on some of the Slash material, Velvet Revolver, Guns, Snake Pit. I thought, that could be kind of cool if you incorporate it all.
Yeah.
And it turned out to be Mono's ad. I mean, that's how I met the guy.
Yeah.
And that was probably in 2011.
Yeah.
And then he reached back out to me in 2016.
Yeah, because I think what would work too, like you're saying, because it make it, you have a lot more material to pull from. Like, could you imagine having a show where they're paying tribute to Slash as a whole? You get a little bit of Snake Pit, a little bit of Velvet Revolver, a little bit of the solo material, and he's got like 4 or 5 solo albums now under his belt, as well as the GNR stuff.
It would be a 6-hour show.
But at the same time, then. You'd have to really know what to pick from, but that's why I think the Guns N' Roses thing, like what you guys are doing, works a little better.
Yeah, God, we love playing long shows.
Yeah.
Every one of us in the band, so playing 3 hours straight isn't a problem.
Yeah.
We get to dive into those deep cuts, and it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun.
And then before we wrap this up, Shawn, I wanted to ask you. So. Obviously, how musicians make a lot of their, paycheck these days is doing live shows, and in reference to this COVID-19 thing, it's the crazy government out there talking about, we don't know when we're going to allow concerts to start. I mean, how is that all affecting you guys and what you do?
Luckily, I don't think any of our jobs are affected. We all have day jobs. We're not up there with Queen Nation yet.
No, but people know who you are. You have a little bit of a internet fan base, which
Yeah, I mean it's good. We have good turnouts, so I'm not going to complain. But the money, you get used to doing something so long and expect to have a certain amount of money at the end of the month. Yeah, it does take its toll.
I mean, this is really a new world we're living in.
We're all fortunate. We're all fortunate to have our regular day jobs and not be much affected by it.
I mean, this is really a new world we're living in. Who would have thought?
Oh, yeah.
Who would have thought that we'd be living in, something like this or through something like this? And just to give you a little something to laugh about, I'm sure you can relate to this. Who would have thought in 2020 the big commodity would be toilet paper, if you know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I'll give you a funny story here. I mean, when this all started, I had toilet paper at home. It wasn't like I was running out, but I remember just some friends started telling me, "You better go get toilet paper." There's no toilet. I'm like, "Oh, you got to be kidding!" And then first I could find it, but then all of a sudden, I mean, I was going out early in the morning trying to find where they had it. Eventually, the only place I could. It makes me wonder how many people weren't wiping their asses properly before. Yeah, I mean, the only place I could find it at one time, it's much better than it was, but one time I could only find it at Target. And the funny thing is, you couldn't just tell you, "Oh, if you're here to get water or toilet paper, you got to stand in front of a store and we'll let you in one by one." And then once you get in the store, okay, there's a line over there for toilet paper, and then we'll hand you, you can only get like 1 or 2 things of toilet paper. And the only roll they had at the time was, they had no other thing you could get but a 30-pack roll, of course, for, gouge the price a little, $30, but only thing in town. So, okay, got to get this, but luckily I've been good on toilet paper for 2 months now, so.
Right. Yeah, it's amazing how unprepared we are.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, going back to, not playing shows and not having that income, that's kind of whatever. We really miss playing.
Well, that's what I mean.
That's what it boils down to. And I've never looked forward to band practice so much. We're actually going to practice next weekend, and it feels like we're playing a show.
Yeah, and final question on that is, I'm sure you've seen these other bands like putting on live performances from their homes or like doing rehearsals, putting them on Facebook. Have you guys given any thought to do anything like that, just to kind of entertain the fans until you're able to play out live again?
We thought about that, but there's nothing like just doing a show.
Of course, yeah.
The thing is, if I had time to do that, I'd probably just be working on original material.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I will say on that subject is I do think it's a very creative thing that some of these bands are doing kind of in this modern time. And it is one thing.
Yeah, I think the original band doing it would be great.
And what I think about some of these original bands doing it would be great is, even if people are telling you like, oh, don't release your new album, we're gonna wait till this stuff is all over. You could go online and do this stuff. You could even release some of it yourself, make it available for fans to purchase. I mean, there's no end, I think, in sight to doing stuff like that.
Right, right. I mean, one thing that we've thrown around is possibly I would never want to try to re-record any of the material just because it's so set in everybody's brain on how it should sound. So we're thinking about somewhere down the line maybe releasing, some acoustic stuff, like Rocket Queen acoustic or, stuff like that.
That would be cool. And because, especially a song like Rocket Queen, you think that's like kind of a rockin' tune. I can't really see that as acoustic, but I could see you guys doing some. I mean, speaking about acoustics, I mean, two albums I recently been listening to is I just got the new acoustic album by Jack Russell's Great White, and it's kind of like a retake on like some of the older Great White stuff that he did. And,
nice.
And then Tesla, that's known for doing that acoustic album back in the 90s.
They're badass, yep.
They came out with like kind of an anniversary of that, and they got some of their newer tunes on there and some of the classic tunes, and they got like a new version of Signs and Love Song. They actually recorded the new album like at Abbey Road because it was like the 30th anniversary of it. But it's got some cool stuff on there if you're a Tesla fan.
Oh, I'll have to check that out. Yeah, definitely.
Well, I just want to say, Shawn, thanks for taking time to talk to me today. It was real fun getting to know you, and you gave a real great interview here. So much that I hope we can keep in touch and do it again.
Oh, that'd be cool, man. When it comes to GNR, I mean, I could probably talk all day about it.
That's what you do, yeah. And why not?
From a kid to now, it's just been such a journey. And I don't even know if it's the albums themselves rather than, the journey leading up to these new albums.
Yeah,
because they're so far in between, Appetite and Illusions and Democracy, and, there's just a journey.
I mean, even from Appetite, which was 87 to 91 when those albums came out, and then that by the point 91 came around, it's like, are these albums ever going to come out? I mean,
and that's what it feels like with every GNR record, even the material they're working on now. A little bit of it's leaked, not much, but but it's like, come on, I'm feeling it. I'm excited again, and I feel like a kid, and I kind of hope every other GNR fan out there is too.
Yeah, and that's what made this such a great interview talking to you, because just talking to you, and I think anybody listening back to this will hear your enthusiasm for Guns N' Roses as a fan, for what you do, and that's got to be part of being in this band. What makes it so much fun is that you have such a love for this band and this music, Whereas if you're just join whatever gig I get, maybe it doesn't mean nothing to you, but you could tell like you really got the heart for what you do,
Yeah, and we all do in the band. I mean, I would say probably me and Mono most. We're probably the biggest of the fans, but yeah, I mean, everybody in this band loves GNR. We're enthusiastic about the music and don't want to disrespect it.
And like
so we're trying to do the right thing here.
And like I said, Shawn, I'll try to get my best get it up in the next week or two. I got a few more things to post first, but once it gets up, I'll be sure to let you know, and you're welcome to not just tell all your friends and fans, but post on any of your sites if you wish to do so. And like I said, great getting to know you, and I'd like to do it again down the line. So
you too, Jason.
Okay, bye-bye.
Well, I appreciate it. Stay healthy, and hopefully we can catch you all at a show.
Okay, will do, my friend. Bye-bye.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.